Hey, Newbie Dan here, battling some allergies. I'm sorry if I sound a little raspy here and there. For a while now, I've been promising to show you my DIY router lift for my Plunge router. Well, I finally got the last of the bugs worked out, so it's time to honor that promise. I'm going to show you how the lift works, how it's constructed, and how it mounts to my router table. This is not a build video. If you want to see a build video, please leave comments. If there's enough interest, I'll consider making one. A last-minute addition to this video is my new dust collection solution for this lift. I finally figured it out. So if that sounds interesting to you, stick around. I've got two SketchUp models for this project up on 3D Warehouse. If you don't know how to view SketchUp models, make sure you watch my video, Viewing SketchUp Models for Newbies. It'll teach you everything you need to know. The SketchUp model Plunge router lift with lever has all the details for the lift itself. The router table for Plunge router lift model has the details for the router table. For both models, version 1.10 and later include the new dust collection solution. This lever raises and lowers the router. It locks into place with this clamp. I just now replaced the clamp I had been using with this one. The old clamp had this micro adjuster on it, but I never used it. Because of how levers work, it takes a big move out here for a little move at the router, so the micro adjuster was pretty much useless. It's pretty easy to fine-tune the bit height using this lever all by itself. You'll see the old clamp throughout the rest of this video, but as I said, I use this new one now. There's no need to clamp the top of the lever in place. The weight of the router keeps the lever from moving up. And trust me, the router does not move. When I raise the lift all the way up, I can change the bits pretty easily thanks to this collet extension. I might as well talk about it now since we're here. It's called an extreme extension and I bought it on Amazon. To change the bit, all you need is a hex key. It's awesome. The extension itself has a 1/2-inch shank. It accepts bits with 1/2-inch shanks and comes with an adapter for 1/4-inch shanks, although any standard adapter will work. Now that I've fixed all the bugs, this lift works about as well as I could have hoped for. Okay, let's jump right into the guts of the lift. That didn't come out right at all. How about let's dive into the details? Much better. The lift is made up of two main parts. The housing, which has two Rockler miter tracks mounted on the inside, and the carriage, which has two rails that move up and down in the miter tracks. The rails are made out of UHMW plastic. The carriage moves up and down very smoothly, with absolutely no side-to-side or front-to-back play. You can't get any more stable than this. The last problem I had, which is now solved, was that the lift wouldn't come down on its own. I did a little sanding, and now it's perfect. Most of this is 3/4-inch Baltic birch plywood, except for the carriage top, which is 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood, and the lever, which is 3/4-inch red oak. The housing not only has the tracks for the carriage to ride in, but it keeps the dust inside so it's easy to collect. This hole in the back was one attempt at dust collection, but ignore it because it goes away later on in this video when I talk about dust collection. The housing has a door in the front to make it easy to get to the speed control on my router. The door used to be screwed on, but now I use magnets. There's a reason it was originally screwed on, but as with most projects, it evolved over time and the screws aren't needed anymore. The door has a small slot for the power cord and a larger slot for the lever. The lever slot has a couple of strips of rubber from an old bicycle inner tube to help keep the dust inside. They work surprisingly well. In the back of the housing there's a bolt, and the lever has a notch that fits over the bolt. The bolt acts as the fulcrum. The carriage has a skateboard bearing on the bottom that rides on the lever as the lever moves up and down. Here's how I attach the router to the carriage. I removed the router's springs so I could plunge it all the way down. This painter's tape helps to get the router as square to the top as possible because my router actually tilts a little when you clamp it down. I'll explain how to check alignment later on. My router's base has two threaded holes in it, so I countersunk two holes in the carriage top to match them. I marked the carriage so I know which side is the front. By the way, the corners on the carriage top are cut at an angle so it won't hit the router plate supports in the table. The router is mounted at an angle to cut down on how wide the carriage needs to be. I make sure I have the speed dial facing to the front. Then I line up the holes and attach the machine screws. I install the collet extension through the oversized hole in the carriage top. Then I put the carriage in the housing, double checking to make sure the speed dial faces the door. I'll attach the lever after I mount the lift in the router table. I tried having the dust port here, but it didn't work very well. I have no idea why I tried it here, so let's just ignore that. I really wanted to put it underneath the lift, sucking air down through the bottom of the lift, but I can't make the lift any taller. My router table has a 2-inch tall crossbeam here, and my router lift has to be able to slide under it, which it can barely do now. But as I was getting close to finishing this video, I had a brainstorm. Once I get the lift past the crossbeam and attach it to the underside of the table, I've got about 2¼ inches of room to attach something to the bottom of the lift. So I built this solution, which I'm calling a dust drawer. I can just slide it under the lift and it attaches to the bottom with magnets. I cut a bunch of holes in the bottom of the housing so the dust can get sucked out the bottom. The drawer is a little over 2 inches tall and it's made out of 1/2-inch plywood. The bottom's made out of hardboard, 1/8 inch thick. The baffle is also made out of hardboard and it sits in a couple of dados I cut in the sides. The dust port is 1 3/4 inch in diameter, which is just the right size to be able to jam this dust hose adapter into it and have it stay in place. I originally thought I'd attach the dust hose using magnets like this, and it might still work, but I'd need larger magnets because these just aren't strong enough. For now, I think just jamming the hose adapter into the port is good enough. By the way, I'm using this hose kit from Rockler. It's got a 2¼ inch connector on this end, and it comes with a couple of connectors for this end, for use with things like a sander, for instance. It's a great kit, but it's not cheap. Fortunately, I bought it a while ago when it was on sale. I cut a new hole in the back of the router table for the dust hose. I'll patch the old one later. It'll fit right in with the other patched holes I've tried. So let's put the lift back in the router table and see how it works. I slide the lift into the table past the crossbeam. I stick the drawer under the lift to raise the lift high enough so I can attach the screws. At the start, I set my drill's clutch so it's really loose. That's so if I miss the existing holes in the lift housing, the SPAC screws I use won't just make a new hole, which they would. By the way, I countersunk the existing holes in the lift housing to help make it easier to get the screws in the holes on the first try. I've got some marks on the top of the lift housing that I try and line up with the router plate support to help me get the lift in the right place. I only have to get one screw correct on this side and one on the other side, and everything else will line up perfectly. I usually get it right the first time. I mentioned I'm using SPAC screws, and when you combine SPAC screws with good quality plywood like this Baltic birch, you can reuse the same screws and holes many, many times, as I've done over the 16 months or so since I started this project. I tighten all the screws with the clutch still set low, then I tighten the clutch and finish driving the screws, getting the lift nice and snug. I've pulled out the dust drawer, and I push the hose far enough in that I can grab it from the front. I stick it in the drawer's port, and slide the drawer back, and eventually the magnets snap on. I install the lever by sliding it under the skateboard bearing and over the top of the fulcrum bolt. Add the housing door, and make sure the inner tube rubber isn't sticking out. Plug in the power cord and figure out what to do with it. I used to tuck it under the lift, but the dust drawer's there now, so now I'll just have to gather it at the front. Then I put the outer door on, making sure the clamp is underneath the lever. I put the top back on, and then the router plate. I'm only using the drill to get the screws started in the holes. Then I finish with a screwdriver. Add the fence, and I'm good to go. I've got this 1/2-inch steel bar that I use to check the router's alignment. I use a speed square to check to see if the router leans in any particular direction. I check against the table top instead of the router plate because the router plate has adjustment screws, so there's no guarantee it's level. Everything looks good. If it didn't, I'd add more tape to the router base. Now it's time to see how well I did with the dust drawer. I'll cut some dados to get dust going down into the housing. Now for the big reveal. All in all, it worked well, but I obviously need to add more holes in the bottom of the lift housing. Okay, here's the rest of the holes, and it works great. Well, that's it. As I said at the start, this lift works great. I know it looks easy to build, and for the most part it is. Still, if you want to see a build video, leave a comment. Don't forget about the SketchUp models on 3D Warehouse. You can find links for everything in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider leaving a comment. Thanks! Check out the description for links to products seen in this video. Just scroll down, click Show More, and scroll down until you see the links. And if you like what I do here, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to ring that bell to get notified about new videos. Thanks!